Alright, in this video, I'm going to be replacing the condensing unit on my 2012 Nissan Pathfinder. I've already done the AC compressor, so this is a bit of an extension. First thing I'm doing is pulling off the negative battery terminal, and then I'm going to take off all of the air intake. Now, this includes the air box on the right, and then that's just removed by some mechanical hose clamps. And on the passenger side, it's also a mechanical hose clamp to remove it from the throttle body. After watching a few people do this on YouTube, I think that I've been able to do this with a lot less effort. So hopefully this will make things a little bit easier for other people who also need to do this same job. Now to remove the engine cover, it's just 2 bolts, and then the air duct crossover is also held down by 2 bolts, so you just need to remove those things. So pretty straightforward. I do run into some problems here. Now I would have just done the dryer canister, but my Haynes manual said that it is a non-replaceable item, so I bought the entire condenser from Rock Auto. For the first point, you can replace the drying unit, and that's actually what I end up doing. And in addition to that, the condenser unit I got from Rock Auto actually doesn't fit, which I will show you once I get it into the vehicle. Now, you do need to remove the grill. So for these Pathfinders, there's just 4 plastic clips across the top, and then the whole grill can come out. There's these little screws. They're like little plastic screws as well. So you need to do about a quarter turn and then it'll free the grill up to be pulled straight out. And then there's 4 clips along the bottom. You need to push those down and then the grill comes off. It's actually really easy to get the grill off. And you need to remove the grill so that you can remove the brackets that are holding the radiator in place. There's also a small piece of plastic that's sitting in front of the drying canister. You also need to pull off that little piece of plastic. It just has 2 plastic clips, and I think I end up losing one, so I'm gonna have to go to Nissan and get some new clips for this thing. Now on each side of the condenser unit there is an air conditioning line going in. Obviously there's this one on the driver's side. Once you get the bolt out, they pull out fairly easily, especially on the driver's side. The passenger side one is a little bit more difficult, and of course one side's a 10 and the passenger side is an 8mm for some reason. This one's a little tougher because it doesn't have that flexi hose on it. It's more of a fixed line, so it does have enough room to move around, but it is a little bit more difficult to remove from the condenser. There's also a sensor with an electrical connector, so remove the electrical connector, and then it's a 24mm to remove the sensor, and it comes out fairly easily. Pretty much everything comes out fairly easily once you get it moving. Actually, I didn't really have any trouble with rusted bolts or anything like that. I did use a little bit of PB Blaster. This one has a rubber O-ring on it, and I do replace all the rubber O-rings. So, like I said, 24mm fits on like that. So really the only other thing you need to do is remove the 2 brackets that are holding the top of the radiator. So these are both 10mm and they come off no problem. Like I said, I did hit them with some PB Blaster before taking these off. And once the bolts are out, they just pick straight up. And this is also sort of where I see other YouTubers doing content on this, doing a lot more work, like taking off the metal pan underneath the vehicle, as well as taking off radiator hoses. I don't think you really need to do anything else. I do remove this 1 bolt. I don't even know what this radiator up front is, actually. Maybe it's the transmission cooler. I don't know. Anyway, I loosen that up and that gives me a little bit more clearance, but I don't think that's necessary. There's a bolt on either side of the radiator that holds the condenser unit to the radiator. So obviously you need to remove that 1 bolt, like I said, on the driver's side and the passenger side. So at this point, I'm still sort of feeling out how I'm going to get this condensing unit out of there. And what I found is you could just actually lift up the radiator. It's not held in by anything else at this point. It's just sitting on a bracket. So what I do is I pick the radiator up and I move it about 1 inch backwards, and that's going to give me enough clearance to remove the condensing unit so I don't take off that plastic fan shroud. That's it. I don't do anything else. So on this side, you can see I was able to lift the radiator up and move it about 1 inch backwards, and that's enough clearance to get that condensing unit out. And now I'm removing the bolt on the passenger side that holds the condenser to the radiator. Remove some of that cheap foam that's pretty much all disintegrated, and I'll get that out of the way. And like I said, I picked the radiator up, move it about 1 inch back. So I've moved it out of the holes that it sits on, but it's still sitting on the brackets, and then the condensing unit just comes straight out. So like I said, I saw a lot of people doing a lot more work to get this out, but it is actually pretty easy. There's two rubber pieces on the bottom of the old condenser that need to come off, and here's the new condenser. I still think it's going to fit in the vehicle at this point, but I'm about to be severely let down, and the problem is that drying canister sits too far forward. Anyway, you can see where the condenser sits in front of the radiator, and then you can see what I'm talking about. The radiator just sits in that hole, and you can pick it up and move it about 1 inch back. So the radiator still sits on that bracket, so it's not going to drop down, but it's giving me about 1 inch of clearance, and that 1 inch of clearance is all you need to get that condensing unit out, and it's the same on both sides. So there's rubber feet on the bottom of the radiator, they go in that one hole, and the condenser unit also has those rubber feet that sit in the cutouts in front of the radiator. Now, I did not video myself putting the new condenser in, but you're going to see me putting the old condenser back in a second here. So like I said, the problem is that drying unit on this radiator sits too far forward. So you can see me trying to move that forward radiator back into position, and I can't do it. So I stare at it for a little while. I swear a little bit. I'm not actually sure if Rock Auto is going to take this condensing unit back now that I've sort of banged it up a little bit getting it in. But you can see that the drying unit is about 3 inches too far forward. Like it's not even close. So I remove it and I just throw it back in the garage. Now, like I said, the Haynes manual said that you cannot remove these drying units, which is all I really want to do anyway, now that I've got the new compressor in. But that's not true, so I already have another drying unit that came with the compressor, and I'm actually going to remove this drying unit and just swap it out for the new one. It was a little difficult to get this off, and I do use a flathead screwdriver sort of very carefully so as not to damage those lines, which are pretty thin. And there's the old drying unit. Pretty straightforward to remove. And now for all of the connecting points, I do remove the O-rings and put on new O-rings. I also take some of the air conditioning oil that came with the compressor, and I just soak the O-rings in some of that oil for a second. And then obviously I slide the new O-rings into position. The drying unit goes in no problem. I have no idea why the Haynes manual says you can't change these things, but you definitely can, as I just did. And obviously there's a bracket that you need to put back into place. So yes, I am putting the old one back in now that I've got that drying unit installed. And I would say that you would probably need to take out the condenser anyway in order to remove and replace that drying unit. So you can see I'm going to pick up the radiator. I'm going to move it again about an inch rearward. And that's all the space that you need for this. And then you can see how easily that this condensing unit is going to slide straight back into place. So really it doesn't hit anything on the way down. It's not like I'm beating the crap out of it, trying to get it into place by doing shortcuts or anything like that. It absolutely works perfectly. And then once the condenser is sitting where it needs to, you can just lift the radiator up, move it about an inch forward so that the rubber grommets on the bottom of the radiator slide into the holes in the brackets. And then that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to take the bolts and reconnect the condenser to the radiator. And just because of the space limitations, I just found that the ratcheting wrenches were probably the tool of choice. And just because I took this bolt off, I'm obviously going to put it back on. Like I said, you actually don't need to take this off either. But I think it did give me a little bit more space to work, and it's actually very easy to remove that one bolt. Then I'm going to take the bolts and brackets for the radiator and reinstall those. And honestly, I can't tell you how relieved I was that I was able to do this without doing some of the work that I saw other YouTubers do. Before installing the AC lines, I do clean them up a little bit with some paper towel, and then I just use the air conditioning oil to help out in the cleaning process. Like I said, I do remove all the old O-rings, install new O-rings, and then obviously I'm going to put those lines back in place. Now, I did this job without knowing any torque specifications. Everything I put in here, I just go to slightly snug. I'm in the 8 to 10 foot-pound range. There's nothing in here that needs to be heavily torqued down. On the passenger side, I put that one sensor back in place first because it's on the bottom, and then I'm going to do the air conditioning line that's obviously above that sensor. The hardest part of this whole job was honestly getting the O-ring off the passenger side air conditioning line, also known as the high side line, and then getting the new O-ring in. It was an absolute pain to get the what is a smaller O-ring onto that because you have to reach down, you can't lift it up like the other one, and actually have it into a position where you could reasonably work on it. Once I've got the O-ring sorted out, I reinstall the high pressure line. I did find a deep socket with a long extension was helpful for getting that one into place. Once the AC line's in place, I do put the electrical connector on. I could have done that in any order. I installed a piece of plastic that's covering the drying unit. One point to note, I did buy a Vevor vacuum, so I do have a vacuum on the AC lines now, and I started that up because you're going to want that running for a half hour to an hour before you refill the lines. The grill goes in no problem, and then obviously I do all of the air ducting as well. So the product I bought was a UAC. You can see the product number there, and like I said, don't buy this. It's a 3331 PFC, and it doesn't fit. I don't know what it fits, but it does not fit a 2012 V6 Nissan Pathfinder. Now, I had a suction going for a while on this thing, and I also turned the suction off just to see how long it would hold that negative 30 psi pressure, and I left it for about an hour, and it still appeared to be in that minus 30 area. So now that I've got some new refrigerant, I'm going to close the lines, turn off the vacuum, and then put in some new refrigerant. So I do use leak stop. This thing hasn't had any refrigerant in it for quite a while, so I am going to warm it up with some leak stop. You do need to know how much to put in. It should be a sticker on your vehicle somewhere. There is a sticker on the hood in my case. Now before I put in the AC, I do bleed the yellow line. There's no bleeder valve on this, so I just unscrew the line a little bit and allow some of the refrigerant to come out the top. And then I dump the first can of refrigerant with the leak stop straight into the system. And it takes the full can almost instantly. I'm sure the vacuum on the system helped to get all the refrigerant in there very quickly. For the second can, I do start the vehicle, so you can see that the pressure is coming up on the red side as I'm doing this, and it's going to go to about 150 psi. And on the blue, you can see that it's quite high right now, and that's just because the refrigerant is going into the system. But when I close the can, as it is now, you can see that the low side pressure drops down. Now, one thing to note, you must keep the high side pressure valve closed, and the one I'm referring to is the one right beside the pressure gauge. Otherwise, it's going to push all the refrigerant back into the can because it's obviously at 150 psi, and that can may or may not be able to handle that pressure. So never open the high side valve when you have a canister of AC on. Now I probably will do a full video on how to recharge your system with this setup, but this video is already long, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. And obviously both valves are closed, and I'm going to just discharge the lines. There's a little bit of refrigerant left in the system. So it's really just a mix of butane and propane. It's not even proper refrigerant because you can't buy that in Canada, but so far so good. Everything works and nothing seems to be leaking. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.